right, this is a video about SpecStory, which helps you when you're doing AI-driven development using a tool called Cursor. But what if you haven't been doing AI-driven development and you're just getting started? Well, this video is for you. I'll help you get set up with a tool called Cursor that'll let you do software development even if you're not a software engineer or coder. All right, and while the rest of this video is going to use a Mac for demonstration purposes, we can get to the exact same state using Windows, and that's what this part will show you, how to get set up with Cursor on Windows. Because once we've got Cursor set up, all the rest of the flow is exactly the same. So let's start by going to the Cursor web page and downloading and installing it. Okay, now that that's done, we can go ahead and click on that to run the installer. And with Cursor installed, we can just go through some basic configuration. We can accept all these defaults and say continue. You could choose to send usage tracking to help improve Cursor, or turn on privacy mode and continue. And Cursor is the one tool that you'll have to sign up for a subscription for. And it's well worth it because it's what unlocks all the magic for the AI coding flow we're going to do. And so if you're already signed up like me, you can just go ahead and log in. If not, you can sign up for a new account. And once you've got that all set up, go ahead and close that window and come back to Cursor, and you'll see that it's installed and ready and up and running. Now, what we want to do is create a new project, but there are actually quite a few steps we're going to need to go through in order to create a new project for the first time. Now, almost all of these steps are just one-time steps. So while there might be a lot of them, if you just follow along closely, you should get to a point where you're set up to be able to create new projects whenever you want. So the first step is that we've got to get a running terminal or command prompt here on Windows. And while Windows does have a built-in terminal, we're going to end up installing a better one. So most software developers, when working on Windows, end up using something called Windows Subsystem for Linux. And that's what we're going to install here. So if you've got Windows running, the thing we need to do first is get WSL installed. And WSL, you could almost think of it as like we're going to have a whole second operating system installed here. We're going to have Linux installed side by side with Windows, and they can both work together. And we just need to run this command in order to do it. We need to run this command, and the place we run it first is in PowerShell. We're going to just use PowerShell one time and then really never have to use it again. But we copied that command from the install documentation. We run it here. We say yes, and it just takes a few minutes for WSL to install. And part of WSL is that it will get a Linux operating system running side by side, and there are lots of different flavors of Linux operating system, but we'll use the default one, Ubuntu. It's what almost all online documentation will reference. So we'll have a pretty standard system that'll let us easily work with existing AI tools and existing documentation. And we're just going to have to restart the system in order for this to take effect. So we'll meet back here after that. Okay, now that we've rebooted, WSL installation is all set, and we can run Ubuntu for the first time. Whenever we talk about running the terminal, from now on, we mean Ubuntu. And that terminal is just a different interface to the operating system. And it's going to let us type instead of clicking around in order to run programs or interact with folders and files. And this is the type of tool that we use in software development and in software composing. Okay, so now we've installed Ubuntu, and you have to remember, like I said, it's a whole operating system, a Linux operating system that runs side by side with Windows, and so we have to create a new user account for this operating system. And so you can use any name you want. For this, I'll use demo. And then you're going to have to create a password too. Now you can reuse your Windows password if you want, but whatever it is, just make sure that you remember it because you need to log in not only to Windows but to the Linux operating system as well in order to do development. And here we are at a command line, and everything is set up and ready for us to now do Linux-based development on our Windows box. That means we'll be able to match up with a lot of the instructions that we get back from AIs and also with a lot of online tutorials and documentation. It'll feel exactly like developing on Mac OS or on Linux. So now how do we create our first project? Well, you could always ask for help from an AI, right? So we might say something like, how do I set up a new Next.js project on WSL with ShadCN? So lots of terminology in there, but just to call a few of them out, Next.js is a pretty standard framework that gets used for building web applications. It's a great one for use with Cursor. WSL is what we just installed, the Windows subsystem for Linux. It's a way of making sure that the AI knows which operating system we're talking about. And ShadCN is a UI component library, also great for rapidly composing applications. And I can ask this question and it'll walk me through a bunch of steps to go ahead and do it, right? So the thing is, all these steps have dependencies, right? It's telling us to run a bunch of commands, and we don't have these commands installed yet. So like I said, there's going to be a lot of steps, but it's just a set of one-time steps that we need to get the system up and running, and those steps essentially just involve getting the prerequisite software installed onto our computer for being able to create these new Next.js projects. Homebrew is what's going to let us set up all of the underlying requirements for development in a way that's very consistent with the way we would do it on Mac, for example. So let's start from installing Homebrew, and we can see this command is exactly what we need to get Homebrew installed. We can just paste that command in here. This is that Linux password that you just created. And it's easy to overlook it, but these next steps are pretty important. So to run these three, we just select them all and right-click, and then where we want to paste them, we right-click again, and we can hit enter, and all those will run. And then we're going to follow these two more. We're going to run this command, and then we're going to run this command. So let's copy this one. And this one will take a little while to run, and we'll scroll a bunch of stuff off the screen on us. And then we'll come back up and grab the other one. Answer the yes to all the questions, or in general, select the defaults. Oh, yep, and let's do exactly what it says, right? So run apt-get update. So the actual command we need to run is sudo apt-get update. This makes sure that our underlying WSL Ubuntu installation is up to date. Okay, great. And sudo apt upgrade. Yes. Whoops. Enter yes to accept those defaults. Now we'll run those final two commands that Homebrew said to install. So nice thing in a terminal like this, you can just use the up and down arrows to go back and forward through your recently used commands, sudo apt-get install build essential. Again, select the defaults. And if we come all the way back up to where we installed Homebrew, we can get that last command, this brew install GCC. Again, right-click it, and then down here we can right-click to paste it. All right, and now our first set of dependencies are out of the way. We've got Cursor installed, WSL installed, and Homebrew installed. And Homebrew is going to let us install the last dependency we need, which is Node, which will then let us run those commands to create our new application. There's just one more step to make sure that we've got WSL and Cursor running happily together, and that's to install something called the WSL extension into Cursor. So if we go ahead and start Cursor up, there we go. We'll just go ahead and pin that to the taskbar. What's going to happen is if we work with Cursor as it is, it's just going to want to work with the files that we have on the Windows file system. And really we want it to ignore Windows and start working with WSL, that Linux install. So in order to do that, we need a Cursor extension called WSL. But Cursor is actually just a flavor of Visual Studio Code. And so when we're talking about extensions, we're talking about VS Code extensions. So we can search for the VS Code extensions marketplace. Now, just a couple of tricks around this. Extensions from this marketplace are a little tricky to install into Cursor, and the particular extension we need, WSL, is very tricky to install into Cursor. But again, we just have to do it the one time, so let's walk through it step by step. WSL, here it is by Microsoft. That's the extension that we need. You're going to want to hit this big install button, but don't, because that'll install it into VS Code. We actually need to download the extension, and we're going to manually install it into Cursor. So that extension is downloaded, that file saved, and now we go back into Cursor. And to install an extension into Cursor, there's actually a special command prompt. So this command palette you can bring up with the View command palette, or you can hit Control-Shift-P. And this palette is like all of the commands you could ever do in Cursor, including the ability to install an extension. What you actually want to search for is VSIX, the name of the type of extension, extensions installed from VSIX. So that command is going to pop open a file browser. We go to what we just downloaded from the marketplace, that V6 extension. We hit install, and there it is. But you see here, WSL extension is supported only in Microsoft versions of VS Code, and we're using a Cursor version of VS Code. So there's just one more step that we need to take, which is we'll exit out of Cursor, and you can search for this problem. This is how I came up with the workaround. But if you search for Cursor WSL not working, you can see other people have had this problem. And then it's actually, sorry, Cursor WSL extension not working. Let's see if we can find one. Here we go. This thread from September, WSL extension is supported only in Microsoft versions of VS Code. That's the exact error that we got. We can see here. And you can always come to this thread for the latest, because there might be different things that you need to do to get this working. But if you come down pretty far, right at the bottom, we can see some of the most recent solutions. And the one that we want to use is this one here for newer versions. Yep, so we're on this version, 88.5. That's the one that we downloaded. Again, you may see newer ideas about how to work around the problem in the future, but for now, this will work, right? So what we want to do is inside of this Ubuntu terminal, first let's check if, whoops, echo $WinUser. See if that's defined. Yeah, it's not defined. So somebody was trying to be nice and tell us what we want to do in terms of getting into the right directory, but it's not /WinUser, so it's actually, whoops, it's not WinUser. It's actually the name of our Linux. Sorry, not the name of our Linux user. The name of our Windows user, which is not defined here. But you could find it from, for example, coming into this PC and seeing under users what the name of your Windows user is. But I'll just start typing Jake. Oops. Yep. Capitalization matters. So mount C users, your username, and then we can pick up the rest of this, copy it, come back here, and paste it. Whoops, we ended up with too many slashes there, so I didn't quite get it right. So mount C users, your Windows username, and then the rest of this, enter. Okay, now we're in the right place. And given that we're in the right place, we can run this magic command that's going to just patch the extension so that it does run on other versions of VS Code like Cursor. Whoops. I didn't mean to start Cursor up just yet. I meant to come back to the terminal, paste that one command that we found in here, run it, and now with that patch, we think that Cursor and WSL should be up and running together. We start Cursor again, and we can see we've no longer got that error. And so we're in a pretty good spot now. One more setting that we want to do here is that when we do start a terminal inside of Cursor, we want it not to use PowerShell, but instead to use Ubuntu WSL. Great. So now it looks a lot like our terminal that we want, and we'll set Ubuntu WSL as the default profile. Okay. Now we can delete those, and now anytime, let's give ourselves a little more room here. Anytime we come up here and say terminal, new terminal, it'll start in a WSL terminal. We can close this off for now. Close this out for now, and we're in a pretty good spot finally to get a first project created. And we had asked Claude to help us getting a new project created. And I find that sometimes in this particular part of the setup, Claude is not always up to date with the best answers. And so the best I've seen for getting a new empty project set up with all of the languages and frameworks that we care about is to come to ShadCN, go to the documentation, and it's really this Next.js project that we want to set up. And we're going to set it up using a tool called npm or npx. And in order to do that, we've just got to make sure that we've got npm installed. That gets installed as part of Node. Let's go back to our home directory and get Node installed. Although when we install it, we'll install it universally. But we go to our home directory. Again, a really interesting thing to note. Tilde, cd tilde means go to the user's home directory. Here we are in our user's home directory. Again, because we have two operating systems, there's actually two home directories, the one for Ubuntu Linux and the one for Windows. If we type pwd, print the working directory, it's /home/demo. For me, for you, it'll be /home/ your Ubuntu username that you created. And this is what we're going to work out of. Okay, great. In order to work out of this, in order to set up this project, we've got to install npm, which is part of Node. This is why we installed Homebrew. You could ask install Node with Homebrew, and it'll show you how to do it. Brew install Node, dead simple. Copy that. We can paste it in here, brew install Node. Whoops, just brew install Node. And it'll take a minute or two, and it'll get Node installed. So a bit of a windy path, but we've got all of our dependencies taken care of. Just to list them all out again, we've got Cursor, we've got WSL, which lets us run Linux, so we can follow along with almost all dev tutorials and documentation. We've got the WSL extension installed into Cursor so that the two play nicely together, but unfortunately Microsoft set up the WSL extension so that it fails if it's installed into non-VS Code IDE like Cursor, but then we found on that support forum the patch to get the extension running. So now we've got Cursor running against WSL with the extension installed. Final thing we needed to do was get Node installed so we can start our initial web project. To get Node installed, we needed an installer for it. We chose Homebrew, which will also let us install a lot of other things in the future if we ever need them, like a lot of development tools. And so now here we are. We shouldn't have to run through this procedure again, but we've got a development environment with Cursor, WSL, and Node now installed. And we can know that we have them installed because we could run the node command, -v, to see what version is installed. That looks good. The npm command, which is installed as well, that looks good. And now we can follow along with these instructions. So we're going to create a new project with the init command. Go ahead and copy this. I'm going to come back to our prompt, to our terminal. We're in our home directory here, which is a great place to start working out of. And we're going to paste that command, npx ShadCN latest init. And it's going to say we're installing these packages. Yes, we'll accept the defaults. In general, we'll accept the defaults here. It does not contain a package JSON file. Would you like to start a new Next.js project? And yes, this is us getting a brand new blank project set up. We say yes. We can give our project a name like hello, or any name you want. It'll go through. It'll create a new project for us. Okay, and then after that completed, which might have taken a couple of minutes, we can just accept the rest of the defaults. And again, AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude are your friend if you've got questions about these. And now that, this project is set up, we can use a command called ls, which lets us list files. You can see the hello directory. We can cd or change directory into hello, right? So we're just moving around as if we were like clicking on folders now. We ls again, and there's all the project files that, that just got created for us. This is the code that we're going to need in order to power our website. And now we can open up Cursor, and we're going to be able to access this project. Now, one of the tricks to getting Cursor to open up this this new folder is that the easiest way to do it is to set up something called the cursor command. And so, again, if we go back to the palette, which is our home inside Cursor for lots of things, and we type in here shell command install cursor command. We want that to happen. We say yes, that's okay. And after that, we actually have to exit out of Cursor and exit out of Ubuntu. And now if we open up Ubuntu again, that cursor command should be installed. We make sure we're in our home directory, which we are. Right, we can list out ls, the contents of it. There's hello. And now we can run the cursor command on the hello directory. So in general, that's our trick. We want to be able to see a directory open up with this WSL Ubuntu tag next to it. And the way we do that, again, is by opening up an Ubuntu WSL terminal, navigating to the project we want to open, and then saying cursor and then the name of the project that we want to open. We got that up. We can exit out of that welcome message. And the two things we need to make sure we open up are the terminal, which will always be in the directory of our project to start. And you'll see, right, if we run the ls command, these files match up with the files in our project directory, like that readme matching us up with the readme. And the other important thing is to come up here and toggle on the AI pane. This is the tool we'll most interact with inside of Cursor. It's what's going to let us prompt our way to an application. And so we're all set up now, and we should be able to continue to follow along with the rest of the instructions in the tutorial. So at this point, you're in pretty good shape. I can give you the command that you need to run to get this sample application up and running, but you can also use Cursor and ask it. So what command can I run to start this application? See, so it doesn't have any context. It doesn't know what we're asking about, even though it's all right here. When you have when you use Cursor, you can add context, and context means a pointer to any of the files in your current project directory, or lots of other outside content. But one of the simplest ways, especially when you're started and you just have a tiny project to give Cursor context, is to say that we want to include the entire code base. Whoops, so we can actually say it here with the @ at code base. Is a way to tell Cursor, this chat UI and Cursor, to look at everything here, all the files and folders, when it's trying to answer the question. So if we say that and then ask, what command can I run to start this application, it should be able to give us some help. You can see it's reading all the files in the project in order to help answer the question, right? And you can start the development server using any of these commands. And now I know this creates extra confusion. Turns out the software development community likes package managers and has created 4 different ones that do roughly the same thing. We'll just stick to npm as the command we use for everything when we're doing package management. And so when it says here, it says you can start the development server using any of these commands. When it says that, it means these commands inside of a terminal. So come over to terminal and type out that command. If you hit copy, it'll copy all 4 of them, and we don't want all 4 of them. You could just copy one of them if you want. and then come over here and paste it. But either way, you want to get npm run dev. That command you're probably going to end up memorizing because you run it so often. And what this is doing is it's running what's known as a server, a web server, that allows you to interact with the code of this website in order to see it in your browser, right? So this server will kind of package up all this code and turn it into a website that you'll see. And we can now visit this URL in our browser. I could just copy it and paste it into my browser, or if I want, I can hold down the command key and hit the link, and it'll open my browser right there for me. And this whole site is exactly what this code here says should be rendered. And we won't go into too much detail, but just to sort of prove it out, there's a lot of code in here, but if we get to any of these, you can see get started by editing, save and see your changes instantly, get started by editing, save and see your changes instantly. Like, this is the code that's powering this site. Great. Now we can move on and create a site that we actually want. All right, to create a site that we actually want, because we wanted a hello site, not one that said Next.js and all of this on it. Right, so this is the starting site. Now we can use Cursor to really just do all of the heavy lifting for us. Right, once we get things to this point and set up, the world is our oyster. And so I often like to create new composers when I'm onto a new task. You can always get back to your old composers whenever you want, but I create a new composer. Composer is just like a conversation between you and the AI acting as your engineer. And so I create a new composer, and you could literally ask it to build anything you want. I'm going to start with something simple. Let's make the most fun hello world page we can. It's winter time, and I like the holiday season. Create a page for the holidays and winter. You can get creative and make some SVGs so the page looks pretty. And don't worry if you don't know what an SVG is. It's just a type of image format that Cursor and Claude are particularly good at rendering. So we'll just submit that. Should be enough to get something fun created. And we'll let Cursor and Cursor Composer do its work by suggesting changes and edits to all of our files. I'm sure we could dig in and try and follow along, and there's a lot of learning to be done with that, but sometimes we just want to hit accept all and see what we've got. So one of the nice things is, as you make and save changes in the code, or more specifically as Cursor makes changes in the code and you hit apply all to save them, this server that we were running, so remember we started npm run dev, that's still running, it's going in the background, and it's looking for any changes to our application files, and it's immediately incorporating them so that when we come back to the browser and we reload, we can see those changes. And so look how fun it is, right? This is amazing. I mean, I couldn't have even imagined this a year ago, but Cursor and Claude are able to write the code for a holiday site just like this. Now, let's take a minute to add in some more traditional elements of web applications, and this will start to get at the reason why we installed ShadCN, right? So if we look at ShadCN, it's pretty interesting because what it is a component library, right? Like, if you've been to any website or web application, you've probably seen some combination of these already on the page. I mean, everything from a simple button that looks nice and styled and works well, to a calendar control, or a card, where a card is just this sort of rounded rectangle layout that gets used often in modern web sites and web apps. So we're going to use cards and buttons in our hello site, and the easiest way to do this is what we've been doing so far, to just ask Cursor to help us do that. And so let's add 2 cards to the site that present some holiday greetings. Now I'm hoping that Cursor will pick up this word cards and know that I mean ShadCN cards. Let's see if it does. Yeah, in this particular case, I don't think it did because I don't see any mention of ShadCN. We can accept all, and we can come back to our app. And they do look nice. There's some nice cards there. And so maybe it did pick them up, or maybe that's enough. Yeah, it looks like it just used styling in order to create those cards. I can ask it, did you use ShadCN for those cards? Ah, great, and it explains it to me. Yes, let's do that. This is already a ShadCN project. Okay, we accept that and come over. Oh, we can see something went wrong. This is a great example. Not to worry, Cursor and Claude can help us with this. We just copy the error. Actually, we try to copy as much context as we can, so it doesn't hurt to get the file name in there too. Command-C, come back, and literally just paste that error in, and Cursor will help us. And it realizes that that it's not installed yet, right? So we're going to run this command. Again, when it looks like a command like this, we're going to run it inside the terminal. You have a couple of choices, the easiest of which is to stop what's already running in this terminal. The way to do that is to hold down the control key, not the command key, but the control key, and hit C. So control C, that stops the npm run dev server. And then we can copy this line, paste it into our terminal. And it says, I need to install the following packages to proceed. Okay, yes. In general, in many cases, accepting defaults gets us a long way. The only problem here is, now we can see this didn't work. Another debugging approach is that we can just copy and paste this whole error straight into the same composer history. So it has all that rich context. See, so now it's sending us in a loop. And this is where just having past experience is helpful. So unfortunately, AI and chat can't get us everywhere. What's actually happening, and again, I know this from experience, is that this command is out of date. And if we go back to our ShadCN install documentation, so you remember this Next.js setup guide, when you want to add a component, you can see it looks almost the same, but it's npx ShadCN at latest, and then add the component name. Here it says ShadCN-UI. I can correct it. I can do this manually, or I can tell AI that it's doing it wrong. You've got the wrong command. Look at this recent documentation. And you can either reference the URL of this documentation, or sometimes I find it more consistent to just copy all the text on the page and paste it in. Okay, so we've already initialized ShadCN, and the card component can be added by copying this and pasting that in. Okay, great. So there's our card component. All the way up here, we had already accepted these changes. We're not going to see anything until we get our development server running again. To quickly get back to recently run commands, you can use the up arrow or the down arrow to scroll through your command history. I hit the up arrow a couple of times and I get to npm run dev. Hit enter. We can see we're back up and running on localhost 3000. I can command click into it, close this old window or that old tab, and here we are, and we've got these two cards, which are ShadCN based cards, which is great. And so maybe one more trick just to get through it all. Let's add a button to each of these cards. So we'll add a button to each of these cards that closes the card, and the button can say cheers. Okay, so while that's doing that, we can scroll up and see, okay, it says to run the command again for adding a new component, right? We've got the card component. Now we want to add the button component. Because we've got the context of this whole conversation, including me correcting it, it gets the right command here instead of the wrong command. So I can copy this. And here's an advanced little trick. If you don't want to stop and restart your development server, one cool thing you can do in the terminal view inside Cursor is you can create a new terminal, right? So I can get back to the one that's running my dev server and just let that keep running. I can go into a new one that's giving me a command line so that I can run the command that I want to run. It's going to install this new button component into ShadCN. When I'm happy with that, I can actually close that or kill and delete that terminal, leave this one running. Not sure why those problems are popping up, but we can deal with those a little bit later. We think we've got the button component installed, and we have to finish applying and accepting all the changes that it proposed to get those buttons into the code. We hit accept all, and then when we come back to our window, you can see there's these cheers buttons, right? I can hit cheers and dismiss each of these cards, right? And if I want to see it again, I can restart. All right, one last piece. Let's say that we want to share this page with somebody else. Well, localhost is a special URL. It's not one that I can just copy and paste and share with somebody. It literally means just point to something running on this machine here. Instead, we've got a few more steps to get to the point where this can be live on the web with a URL that anybody can access. So to get to that point, one of the first things that we need to do is get all of the code that we just had Cursor create for us up into a centralized place. And that centralized place that most software developers and software composers use is a tool or site called GitHub. GitHub is just a place where you can store all your code and share it with others. And I highly recommend you use this approach. You can sign up for a new GitHub account very easily. I've already got one, and so I'll sign into it. And I've just got to verify really quickly that this is me. And so we'll do that, and we're in. Now, you don't have to know any of the details of GitHub. We can actually ask Cursor for help on all of this. So I'm brand new to using GitHub. I just set up an account Now, walk me through the steps of getting the code in this project shared on GitHub. Great. So I'm going to ask it that question, and it should walk me through step by step. All right. So let's get, okay, so here are the steps, step by step. First, initialize a Git repository, right? So again, we can stop this running server if we want, or create a new terminal. I'll just hit Control-C to stop this. One thing you'll hit sooner rather than later on Windows versus on Mac is the need to set up your Git identity. You'll see in a few steps we're going to run a command like git space commit. While that might work on a freshly installed Mac, it won't work on a freshly installed Windows PC at this point until we run these two commands. And so just so you know, when your git commit doesn't work, to run these two commands, you're just going to copy this first part, git config -- global user.email, paste that in, and here you're going to put in an email address that you use for GitHub, and then similarly this command with your username. Can run git config -- global user.name, and then you can put in the name you want to use on GitHub. These will just get associated with any code that you push up to GitHub. It's not critical what they are, but it's critical that they both be defined. So you can go ahead and do that now. I want to copy this command and run it in my current directory. Okay, it was already initialized, so I guess it reinitialized it. Good. Add your files to Git staging. Let's do that. Okay, perfect. Create your first commit. Yep, we're going to need to do that. And you'll see this message, really interesting. Your name and email address were configured automatically based on your username and host name, which is great. Sometimes this doesn't happen. If you run into any errors here, again, just copy and paste them over, and you should be able to have Cursor help you. So now that we've done those first three steps, we'll just continue on. So connect your local repository to GitHub. GitHub will show these commands after creating the repository, but they'll look like this, replaced with your actual GitHub. So to me, step 5 is confusing. I don't actually understand it in detail. If I hadn't done it before, I'd be a little lost. And so I would just say, I don't understand step 5. Okay, so it says after you create a repository on GitHub. I didn't create a repository on GitHub. Yeah, let's create one. So go to github.com, click the plus icon, create a new repository, give it a name, and sort of accept the defaults as their recommendation. So we'll come here, we'll hit the plus, create new repository like it suggested. Now, in this case, I find it much easier to just name this repository the same as the name of our project directory. So if you remember, that was hello. So we'll just create a repository named hello. It will be public, meaning everybody on the web will be able to see it and find it, which is not a problem for a sample project like that, but just keep that in mind for future projects. That's all it takes, right? And now we can just hit create repository. And there we go. It's set up, and now we need to follow the commands. And we're going to push an existing repository from the command line. This is exactly what we're doing. We have an existing repository. It's here, it's sort of behind the scenes, but it's what we just did when we did git init. And it doesn't have to be behind the scenes. You can actually see it here This is the Git repository icon. We can switch back and forth between files in the project or the Git repository. So here's our local Git repository, and we'll just follow these instructions right here. So first we do this, then we do this, then we do this. Okay, we're going to allow it to sign in. We have a code, I guess, that we need to copy and paste. So we copy and continue. We're going to continue with this account. We can paste that code it just gave us. Yes, I'm happy to authorize Visual Studio Code, which is sort of another name for Cursor. You're all set. Our device is now connected. We should be able to close that window, come back to Cursor, and it says, I think we're all done. Branch is all set up. And so the way we could check that is by coming back to GitHub, hitting reload on this page, and seeing if it looks like a repository with all of our files. And there they are. It does. So this is great progress. We've now got our files inside of GitHub. And if I didn't know what I was doing, I could clarify and make sure that we've done everything we need to do. So if I say, for example, okay, I created that repo on GitHub and followed these instructions, and you could just paste in, actually we lost those instructions, but I can tell it exactly what we did, right? So we, right here, ran all of these things. So we'll just copy that and follow these instructions or ran these commands. How can I see if it worked? And what are the next steps, if any? And it suggests doing exactly what we did, visiting our repository at github.com, seeing all our files listed there. If you remember, we just did that. And it suggests adding a readme.markdown file to describe your project. You can do this directly on GitHub or locally. Okay, that sounds great. In Cursor, when there are changes, multiple changes that might happen, you have a couple of choices. You can hit accept all, and it'll apply any changes where you see sort of a pending application. Or you could go through individually and accept changes, right? So in this case, I'll accept those changes individually. And if you look over here, there's a new README file that got created. We see that because we're in our version control view and it tracks every change that just happened. Or if we come back to our files view and look at README, we can see that it's added to this file. And this little yellow bar shows all the changes that have happened in terms of adding to this file. So added to the README. Right, if you remember, these are the changes. And this is an interesting view side by side, what the old uncommitted version, or what the old committed version looks like, and then the changes that we've made. So, yep, let's go ahead and commit that and see the commit works and the sync changes work. Say OK, and that goes up there. So git add and git commit was like hitting that first button. Git push was like hitting that second button. In general, yes, the answer to git fetch running periodically is yes, and often when in doubt, I do accept the defaults. And so we can see what just happened by clicking on this README file and noticing that this text about it being a festive winter theme page comes up. So great, we're at the point where we've successfully pushed this to GitHub. But that's not enough. Yes, there's a URL here. It's a GitHub URL. We could share this with somebody, but all they would see is our code, not our running website or application. And so there's just one more tool and one more step that we need to go through in order to get a running application, and that's to use a product called Vercel. And Vercel works very nicely with the type of application we just built, which is known as a Next.js web application. So let's get started. We can just sign up if we haven't already. I'm working on personal projects. It's a great way to do it. My name is Demo, and I can continue with GitHub, and it will just go through and authorize Vercel, which is exactly what we want, right? We can skip all this. But one of the really nice things is that Vercel is now connected directly to our GitHub. Actually kind of surprised that that didn't do it. It looks like there's still an install. So let's make sure we do the install for our GitHub account. Yes, we'll give it access to all repositories. I've worked with Vercel many times in the past, so I trust it to only access what I tell it to. There we go. So our first Vercel GitHub integration was literally just to do the sign in to Vercel. That second one, the install, is what was needed in order for Vercel to connect to our repositories. We can see that hello repository that we just updated 2 minutes ago. I can hit the import button here. Again, often defaults are your friend, especially when you're working with a Next.js application and Vercel. Generally, those work very well together. I can hit the deploy button. And then the really nice thing is that this should take everything that we've done, all that code, and packaged it up. If you want to see more details, you can watch these logs sort of scroll by as it's going through its deployment. But it takes a minute or two, and we just wait for it to complete. And then we can see that we hit some errors. So whoops, we expanded all lines, but let's just look at the errors. And I'd like to copy these, or if I can't copy them, I'll grab a screenshot, copy that screenshot in, come back to Cursor and say, I tried to deploy this on Vercel and got these errors. And then I just paste Command V, the screenshot that I just took, and let's see what its recommendations are. Let's fix these ESLint errors. Now, we could dig in and learn about ESLint. We could Google it. We could ask ChatGPT, or we could even ask Cursor itself what ESLint is. I happen to know it's just a tool for trying to create clean code. So even though these aren't hard errors, it turns out that by default, Next.js and Vercel are configured to really try and have clean code. It explains all these errors to us, but I think I'll just accept all its proposed changes. And then one other little trick, this problems tab, if I come over to it, I can see other potential problems. It turns out these are red herrings. Okay, great. So let's accept those. Let's not worry about these for now. Okay, we've accepted those changes. Now we're having to read a little bit more. Let's get straight into fixing these errors. Yes, fix these errors. Right, it's better to fix the actual issues. Would you like me to fix the specific lines? Okay, let's accept this full set of fixes. And we can say, come back to our terminal, and we'll say, okay, let's get this deployed on Vercel. What are the next steps? Okay, make sure all your changes are committed and pushed to GitHub. Right, we can run these commands, or as we've learned, we can we can just use the Git UI over here. I kind of like the message that it created for us. So let's grab that message, copy it, and put that in the message and commit. Yes, stage, commit, push. Great. Okay, and then we go to Vercel's website. So let's see if we can sort it from here. We're in Vercel's website. We can try and hit deploy again. And hopefully this time we get past those errors. Again, if we want to watch, we can expand all the lines and watch. Okay, so we're still dealing with ESLint errors. So, all logs, no, just the errors. At a certain point, we could decide that Vercel won't build. At a certain point, we could decide that we need to dig in, learn more about ESLint, learn more about Vercel, do some research of our own, build up our knowledge base. But for now, let's try one more time to see if we can have Cursor and Claude get us past it. So let's fix this by installing the dependencies and updating the configuration. Okay, let's copy that. Looks like a terminal command that will run right here. Update your file. Okay, so that install finished. Let's accept and update this file. And then commit and push these changes. So again, we can come here and commit and push these changes. I like to use the visual source control tool. But you could run the commands if you prefer. Yes, we'll run all those. Yes, we'll sync the changes. Those changes should have all come through. And now we'll come back here and we'll try to deploy again. There goes the deployment. We can even see this matches up with the most recent commit that we made. Update ESLint configuration is exactly what we typed into that message. We'll watch as it goes, and hopefully we get past those warnings. Okay, we still got a small warning, but not an error. So hopefully that lets us keep going. Looks like it might. Congratulations, we just deployed a new project. It's fun. It gives you a little preview of it too. After we've gotten through our whole deployment, it turns out there are a couple of different URLs, one that we can visit for working and commenting on this particular deployment, one that we can share with the world. So it's this one that we can share with the world that we care the most about. I guess that's what this little global icon means. We click on it. You can see, our application up and running in our view, and we get a Vercel toolbar and some extra accompaniments because we're logged into Vercel. But if we had shared this with somebody else, which we can simulate by opening an incognito window, we share that with somebody else, they're just going to see our application, our page, it's going to work, and they're going to have a happy holiday. All right, now that we've got our happy holiday site all built, let's learn a little bit about what SpecStory can do to help with this flow. So we can come to SpecStory.com, and right here we'll click on Get Cursor Extension, and it'll give us all the details of how to get SpecStory installed into Cursor. And the first thing we need to do is just download the extension, and then we can open up Cursor. And the command we want to run is on the palette, so we could either choose to view the command palette or hit Shift Command P. And when we get that up, we want to type VSIX. That's the extension for extensions files. And so we're going to look for a VSIX file, the one that we just downloaded, SpecStory VS Code latest.v6, and hit install. And we can see now completed installing the extension. And if we go to our extensions, we can click. And that's it. It's installed. There's some help text and documentation all throughout here, but I'm going to walk you through using it. And so now that we've got SpecStory installed, there's two big things that we can do with it. Those are save this entire chat history, not just this one, but all Composer sessions and chats that we've had. Or we can share these out. So SpecStory makes it really easy to share these with others. So let's start by saving. Both of the commands are run from the command palette inside Cursor. You can get to the command palette a couple of different ways. So you can search help for it, and you can see view command palette. You can also see Shift Command P is the keystroke that'll get you to that command palette. So Shift Command P, and there's our palette. And if we just type SpecStory, we can see our two commands. The first one is to save the composer history. And so saving the composer history creates a new file, and it's a markdown file, which is then opened for preview right here for you. You can close that preview if you don't like it and you just want to look through the markdown file. But you'll see that this is all of the history I've had for building out this entire application. So all of the chats that I've had over here, all the composer sessions I've had over here, are saved in this file for me. And actually, they're staged. If I want to really save this, I can hit Command S, save this file, and maybe we'll call it SpecStory history.markdown. And now there's our SpecStory history markdown file. You can always get back to it whenever we need to. Interestingly enough, we can even reference. That's okay. We can even reference this file if we want, SpecStory history. Give me a brief summary of everything I did in this project. We'll see if it's able to handle that. Look at that. So helps us remember everything we had to do to get through this development. Or if we want to completely unlock this history for others, we can go back to that command palette, again, Command Shift P, and we can say SpecStory share composer and chat history. We see down on the left here that it's published out this history for me to share with others. I can open it, and now I get a nice clean view of everything that happened from start to finish in the AI chat history. It's a great way to share the story of how you created your application.